पेज पे जाके देख, दो चार लोग आ जाएंगे आपको। केवल स्पीकर करा दो। हेलो, हेलो, डॉक्टर कुसुम, डॉक्टर
Hello.
आशीष, am I audible?
Hello. Yes, you are.
Dr. Kusum, Ashish, am I audible to you? Dr. Ashish?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, so we are live now. I welcome Kusum, Chairperson, Department of Microbiology, Dr. Ashish, and all who are live with us in the fifth lecture of our weekend lecture series. I invite Professor Kusum to formally welcome today's speaker. Professor Kusum, please.
Hello. Good morning. Uh, Today we are again here for the lecture series.
आज बंद होगी, ये उतार दे मेरे को। उधर से कर, पता नहीं क्या हो गया। चले सुपर नहीं आ रही आवाज यार, नहीं आ रही रजे, तो नहीं आ रही। हेलो, हेलो,
Hello. Am I audible now? Off कर दो इधर से. Hello. Am I audible? Am I audible, Dr. Naveen?
हेलो।
Am I audible, Dr. Naveen?
Yes, yes, yes. There was some connection problem. Now it's
Okay.
okay.
Okay. Actually, I was connected through two instruments, or from phone also. So here my video may not be coming. So, good morning to all. Today we are here for another lecture of the lecture series, which was started 2 weeks back, every Saturday and every Sunday. So, this is a joint venture of AMI Chandigarh unit as well as Department of Microbiology, Punjab University. Today we have with us Dr. Ashish Ganguly, Senior Principal Scientist, GNR Protein Center, CSIR IMTech, Chandigarh. So we welcome you, Dr. Saab, for this series. This has been started. The basic purpose of this lecture series is to get connected to the senior scientists and faculty in this changing scenario of ongoing pandemic. So our students, they are for the benefit of the students, for the research scholars, we have started this series. And we thank you very much for accepting our invitation and to be with us today morning. So we welcome you, and the topic of Dr. Ashish Ganguly is why some antibodies can and others fail to neutralize HIV. So I think all the students, they'll be benefited, and it's a virus, so we can relate all the things together. Welcome, Dr. Ganguly.
Okay.
I invite you to please
Thank you,
start the
Dr.
lecture.
Kusum. Thank you, Dr. Kusum. Hello, Dr. Kusum.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I will like to read the biodata of today's speaker. So, as Professor Kusum told, we have Dr. Ashish Ganguly with us. I am privileged and honored to read his CV. Dr. Ashish Gangli is senior principal scientist at CSIR IMTech, that is Institute of Microbial Technology, Chandigarh. He did his MSc from Delhi University in chemistry, and then he did his PhD in biotechnology from Punjab University. In the field of his study was biophysical chemistry. And then he has a number of awards and honors to his credit. And most important is he got Bill and Melinda Gates Grand Challenge Award in 2015. Same award he received in 2013 also. In 2006 he had National Center for Neutron Research and State for Maryland Research Support. In 2003 he received an award for membership for European Peptide Society. And the list is long. He has a number of other awards and fellowships to his credit. His research area is, as Professor Kusum told, is biophysical chemistry. He is I think, one of the finest crystallographer at present in India. So in his area, he has published about 70 research paper, and I was just going through the list of journals. All journals are highly reputed journal: Nucleic Acid Research, Biochemistry, Journal of Biological Macromolecules, PLOS One. So he has touched all these journals, and apart from that, he has 5 patents to his credits. And all these 5 patents are just not only that they have been filed. I quite closely follow his research. I know all the technologies developed in these patents. He's trying to put it into the actual use to the society. And he has developed 2 technology. This one is a gelatin estimated kit for therapeutic interventions, and then in vitro diagnosis of TB infections using hair sacs profiles. Some of the students must have heard his lecture on hair sacs profile for detecting TB, a wonderful process he has developed. So he's working actually in number of these types of technology which can be put into diagnosis and all that. Apart from his research, I will like to put that he is a wonderful human being, and apart from that, he is my friend. And because he is my friend, I know him always helping. Very good scientist, very good person. So we are very pleased and happy, Dr. Ashish, to have with us you today. So, and some of the students must have heard him earlier also. He is one of the best speakers in these days, and I think you will enjoy his lecture. Dr. Ashish, I welcome you once again. You can please start your lecture. Thank you. Dr. Ashish, please.
Gupta. Thank you, Dr. Gupta, and good morning all. I really thank all of you who has joined today. So without further delay, I'm going to share the content on my screen, and I hope you guys can see it. Dr. Gupta, just confirm. You can see the content? Hello. Content is visible, right?
Yes, it's visible, Dr. Saab. It's visible.
Okay, so I'll just check it on the Facebook page. I hope it's working there also. There's a slight time delay, but yeah, we can start. So, okay, friends, I am starting. This is an experiment from my side. Yes, it's now coming up on Facebook. 1, 2, 3, go. Yeah, it's coming. Okay, so I'm starting. Right, so there are approximately 38 million people end of 2019 who have been living with HIV positive status, and of this, a large population, almost 90%, are adults, and some are around 1.8 are children. HIV used to be a scary word earlier because it's a retrovirus which can transmit through plasma thing. And once upon a time, it was considered lethal because it did not have main solutions. and getting an HIV positive status used to be almost a death sentence. Now HIV positive patient can be ambulatory, which means that if they're on medicines, they can move around, and even people cannot notice who are HIV positive. Interestingly, one HIV virus, if it infects you, it leads to 70,000 babies inside the cell. So you can understand a single infection can replicate exponentially in the body. So the aim of today's talk is trying to understand with latest information why immune system fails against HIV. Some of you have heard of that HIV does not have any epitopes available against immune system to react. That's not true. We have to understand little bit deeper. Then the question is, by that time we will understand HIV properly, HIV will be gone. So what is the point of studying this? Well, you can look around. COVID has come, and you can see how frantically people are trying, day and night to find a solution for it. The problem is we never studied our books properly, and that is why what is happening when the COVID problem has come. Again, we are trying everything we know, which is like a half-cooked thing. So we are trying our best to find a solution. We don't have rules and regulations to design a vaccine right in one go. We are like trying hit and trials, and so that is where the problem comes. Anyway, today's talk starts. First, I'll show you how the virus looks. This is an old image from 2006. This is cryo-electron microscopy based models of SIV, which is simian immune virus. Envelope spikes. You can see these purple balls. They essentially show the particle of SIV, and the left hand side one is SIV, and the three on the right hand side are HIV. And the white specks which you see on the surface are envelope proteins or envelope spikes of HIV. They are a trimer of GP160 protein, and you look closely into it, the spikes look like kind of a projection coming out of the membrane. It's a tri-pronged thing with roughly 120 degree or symmetry in between. And if you look at it, it has a lobe which is coming out from the center. That is where the GP120, the glycoprotein 120 kilodalton resides, and it is anchored on the membrane of virus using GP41, which is inside, and then membrane protein region. The schematic of the first step of HIV entry is kind of shown here. If you see, this is the membrane. Again, the spike is shown schematically, and it basically looks for this 4-domain protein, which is CD4, and it binds to the first domain, which after binding, there's a portion of GP120 which binds to the co-receptor on the screen, on the membrane of host, which leads to vesication of GP41 inside the host membrane, and the viral material then transfers inside the host cell, going into replication. If you look at GP120, which is glycoprotein 120 component of HIV, it is heavily glycosylated. 50% of the protein has glycosylation. So what is notorious about HIV and what we have understood in last 30 years is that most of the protein sequence of HIV is prone to hypervariation. It keeps mutating at a very high rate, as a result of which the protein sequence against which the immune system is developed changes. And when that the protein sequence changes, the glycosylation which is incorporated on it also changes. So by the time your body remembers what should be the immune response, the virus has changed. So by the time immune system comes, it doesn't recognize the virus and doesn't take it for neutralization mechanism. So If you see this, if you can see the mouse, I wish I could talk back to you guys. Any one of you can comment on Facebook that you are able to see the mouse, please. Can you see the mouse? Okay. Can you see the mouse?
Yes, Dr. Ashish, we can see the mouse.
Okay, then
Yes,
it's good. It's good.
but your slide is not visible now.
Okay, no problem. I'll go back to the content.
Yeah, we
I
can
was
see the
actually
mouse.
cross. Slides back. Yes. Yes.
Yes, now
So,
yes.
so if you look at the schematic here, the V1, V2, V3, V4, V5, they represent the variable regions, which are hyper variable, and those, kind of decorated in other colors are conserved. So you can see most of the portion which gets exposed in GP120 is variable, and that is why these 3 points come, that though in HIV infection a lot of IgG1 antibodies are raised, lot of it is raised, and most of them are against GP120 and GP41, but only handful, you can count them on your fingers, are the antibodies which are known to neutralize HIV. So rarely you will see a newspaper article that somebody suffering from HIV is suddenly cured. You can't find HIV in the body. These are rare instances. So it is very important from structure biology or biophysics point of view to understand what is happening in these patients. And if we understand, then can we apply tools of microbiology, biotechnology to make these antibodies which can be given to those patients or HIV positives who cannot raise an effective immune response in their body. So what is IgG1 antibody? This you might have read in your books. IgG1 is essentially a two-chain component, a variable, and this one I'm pointing to this Y shape. On the left-hand side of the curve, you can see the domains have been shown schematically. There are two domains which are called Fab domains or Fab arms, and they are the ones which bind to antigen, which is HIV component in this case. So right in the center of the slide, the same cylinders have been shown as elliptical balls, and then this is the Fc portion, which binds to Fc gamma receptor after binding to C1q, and then in the inset you can see is a crystal structure of one of the domains of the variable domains of the IgG1, which shows that it is decorated with beta sheets, and there are 3 loops which come out on one side and are essentially responsible for identifying the antigen. This is what we were taught in books, and it is very difficult to erase your mind about once you read something. I remember reading antibody structure for the first time, and so when I started solving the structures or shapes of antibodies in solution, I was very disturbed because it is not a Y shape all the time. So anyway, let's move forward with it. The same antigen, architecture of IgG antibody has been crystallized, but you see that it is not a nice Y shape as you are trying to read from Kubi or any other book or classical book. On the right hand side, you can see the crystal structure of IgG antibody, which is monoclonal antibody, and the PDB ID is 1IgI. You can see that the clouds of FABAM are there on one side, then the cloud of FC is there on one side, but it is not symmetric. There is one arm which is kind of open. You can see hinge region or the linker region which connects FAB and FC is kind of open on one side and closed. So this is where the things start. And this things started, or the journey of this talk actually started in 2001 when crystal structure of intact human IgG B12 was solved and published. It was isolated from a brain dead patient who was able to neutralize HIV. Then this antibody was isolated, sequenced, and then re-expressed, and then its structure was solved. This was a cover page of Science magazine, and it's very important that after the title they used interesting, if you see the title of the paper, Crystal Structure of Neutralizing Human IgG Against HIV, a template for vaccine design. I'll read it again, a template for vaccine design. This was the big thing, because if you can call it that, fine, we have a structure of an antibody and based on this we will be able to design a vaccine. This was a hope. 2001, the HIV-1 scare was very high, and this paper came as a hope to millions of HIV patients around the world. And there was a problem. Notice the name of the first author. Her name is Erika Sapphire. Erika Sapphire is a PhD student and a first author, Science cover page. You imagine where her career would go. Anyway, the question came that it's not Y-shaped. Then the question came, are all IgG1 antibodies Y-shaped? I'm again showing the crystal structure. You can see that one Fab arm of this antibody is extended away from the FC while the other arm is closed. So there was an open and closed arm. Below you see is a rotated, I'm looking at the left hand side, it's a rotated image. And this started the conversation that probably all three domains of which are roughly equal in volume, all three domains of antibody are rotating in all possible degrees of freedom. And during crystallization, you are capturing a shape which is not Y-shaped, which is not symmetric. So this is what I feel, and you will also conclude that each technique can tell you something beautiful, but then each technique is limited. For crystallization, you need a diffractable crystal. For NMR, you can't work on larger systems because antibodies are oddly 150 kilodaltons. NMR is a very big challenge to achieve that. I don't think I'll see it in my lifetime, but yeah, fine, people are trying. Cryo-electron microscopy or electron microscopy can see shapes of antibodies, but then they are again, developing. They cannot give the resolution, but they're trying. Today, I'm also going to introduce you to small angle X-ray scattering, which is the technique I practice and believe in. So what is small angle X-ray scattering? So it's basically looking at protein in solution, and it works on a hypothesis that when we pack proteins in crystals, they sort of just cluster, they sit next to each other and are influenced with each other. But if you want to see how Shah Rukh Khan extends his arms away in movies, you cannot put him on top of a bus with other Salman Khan and others. You have to understand him alone. So same is the story. If you want to see antibodies, how they can open up, they move, you have to see them in solution. And in solution, SAX, which is small angle X-ray scattering, helps you. So coming back to the question, that very likely antibodies move around a lot, and this asymmetric shape solved for the neutralizing antibody is a snapshot. Snapshot means it's moving around and you have basically taken a picture, is a snapshot of all structures which are accessible to this antibody. If you see here, these two extra lines have come. These are the linkers. These are the linkers which connect the Fab arm to the FC, and until this slide, they were blamed for, or they were given the reason for a large amount of degree of flexibility in the antibodies, and crystallization conditions sort of packed the non-Y shape for this antibody. 2008, I took the Air India flight back to India, and the question was, which was in my mind, can I open up a research project answering this question, are antibodies symmetric, asymmetric, or what is the truth to this story? So when I came to India and started discussing this problem with Indian immunologists, they thought it's more of a joke. And then this is what happens when you start working on an idea which is kind of before time. It doesn't get digested because your brain has been wired looking at the books and the traditional knowledge, and you feel uncomfortable looking into new regions. But then the answer to the problem is be shameless. This is one of the advantages when you do not belong to any big group and you don't have any big surname to carry. Be shameless. Don't care about what your bosses think. Just do the experiment. Why? Because the title of the paper said this antibody could be a template for HIV vaccine design. Okay. So what is SAX? SAX is a very simple technique. You take proteins in a solution. You don't need a diffractable crystal. Put it in the path of X-rays. By virtue of having electrons, these proteins or the electrons in these proteins will get excited and will come down back to the original orbitals. And so as a result, they will emit the absorbed X-ray. That X-ray will actually change the energy of the X-ray which is emitting and also its direction. The energy is not changed, but mainly the direction is changed, and that scattering is captured. You process the scattering from the protein in buffer and only the buffer, and then subtract the buffer component. You will get a first order exponential kind of a scattering profile from the protein only. You convert it into real dimensions, and then you feed it inside your computer, and the computer programs will give you a model which roughly represents the scattering shape of the whatever protein or molecule you have kept in the path of X-rays. This is fairly optimized now. Data collection times are in the tunes of 30 seconds to 1 hour. Some people collect data in milliseconds also, but the processing to a structure is 4 to 10 minutes depending upon, or maybe 20 minutes depending upon what kind of modeling you are doing, but it's fairly fast. And it's fairly automated, which removes the need for expertise to a large extent. So this is presuming your molecule or whatever protein you are trying to understand is a uniform density ball of a perfect sphere. Then remember, inside that, or this, if you see this curve, inside this curve, if you plot what are the vectors which can be present inside this ball, it will be a symmetric Gaussian plot with a peak coming at 20 angstrom. This is the very basic concept of solving a structure from a SAX data. Now, if you presume that it's an ellipse, these histograms will be shifted to one side. It will not be a symmetric Gaussian. If you presume that the protein has two domains instead of one, then the curve which you will calculate will have two peaks, one originating from both of them and another one will be originating because of inter-domain vectors. If these vectors are at 90 degrees, the peaks will be separated, and if these are roughly at any other angle, the peaks will be separated accordingly. And then there is something more. If these domains are very rigid, the peaks will be very sharp with dip in between, like in the fifth panel. And if they are flexible, the gap between the two domains will disappear because the motion, the vectors will be communicating better. And then the modeling essentially is a computer program nowadays. So if you can see the open circles here, that is the rough data collected. And this is the data collected for a protein called calmodulin. It was collected and solved in 2006, you can see, and this was my 500 megahertz single processor laptop, and you can see how fast it can solve the structure. So in other words, modeling is not that time consuming when you are storing using SACS data. So the protocol is very simple. You have these open circles of data. You presume it to represent that it represents the green line which runs through it, which is the smoothened or the representative data. And then you ask your computer to align dummy residues. Dummy residues means they don't have any definition which amino acid or sugar they are. It will move them in three-dimensional space, and at every step it will calculate this model's SACS profile, which is the red line. And then the computer will search for a solution when the red line and the green line will overlay. For this one, it took me roughly around 3 minutes. And what did I solve? I solved a shape which looked like this, two views I'm showing for calcium-free calmodulin. So how does it compare? So this is the structure of calmodulin in apostate solved by Advaxis group. And it took them, good time to solve this, roughly 3-4 years with 3 postdocs. And you can see that one domain of calmodulin, if you superimpose, the other domain appears to be moving or adopting any shape in the near about space. If you take the shape, which, can you see the red line here? This is the shape of apocalmodulin when you solve all 33 structures into one. And you see that it matches very well to the 3-minute model solved by SACS. Now, interestingly, when you add a lot of calcium, this shape changes dramatically. And it matches very well with the crystal structure solved by Babu et al. So this shows that, yes, using SACS, we can not only solve the calcium-free calmodulin, but we can also solve the calcium-activated. But then we can also solve intermediates, which other techniques can't solve. So this is before time data, means this data was published, I think, in 2013. To date, nobody, including myself and my friends, have been able to solve models which fit inside there. So this is what I say when you go before time. I don't have any structures to compare for the central ones, but we are working on it. One day we will succeed. So anyway, nutshell is SACS is beautiful. You can solve shapes of proteins very reliably and very fast. So there are advantages of the system that you don't need a crystal. You can work with very low sample volumes and concentrations, but yes, protein should not be aggregated. It should be preferably in one phase. Multiple phases cannot be solved with reliability. And this is how we move forward. Few of the things to remember, terms. One is called radius of gyration. Radius gyration means movement around center of mass. So how your molecule moves around its center can be calculated, termed as Rg. Maximum distance in a molecule is called Dmax, and the intensity at zero angle, which you cannot measure experimentally but can be extrapolated, is called I0. It is proportional to the mass square, which allows you to confirm what is the concentration of the protein while collecting data, or if you are doing complexes, you can see how the association level or the complexation level is changing. So 2008, I took the Air India flight. 2009, I started setting up the lab in Institute of Microbial Technology. Somewhere February, students started joining the lab. So I had the idea in my mind. So I wrote to NIH AIDS reagent program that if you give me the antibodies, I would like to study them in via SAX method. They are very kind. They take your proposal, they review it, and if they find it useful, they support you with reagents. So I got the antibody IgG1B12, which was the science paper, and then I studied it and I collected data in Brookhaven National Lab. So how did the data look? If you see on the left hand side, this panel, this is the SAX profile from IgG1B12. Center, you see the Kraki analysis, which is basically when you multiply intensity with a momentum transfer vector and square of it and then plot it. If it shows a peak profile, that means the protein is folded very well. If it shows kind of a going upwards, like a Gaussian plot or a hyperbolic plot, it means that the protein is highly flexible. Same way, P of R estimation, if you see there are two nice peaks, clear peaks, which suggest that there are two domains which are kind of connected by a non-flexible linker. Please listen this carefully. We concluded from this data that IgG1 antibody, which is expected to be 3 domains, looks like 2 domains connected via non-flexible linker. So this is the old slide I had shown you, that if it's a flexible or non-flexible linker, you can see that similar story we were observing. Now when we solve the structure of it, we got this kind of a shape where there's a one volume on one side, and there's definitely this was not Y shape, which Kubi was teaching us. Sorry, I have nothing against Kubi, or our teachers tried to teach us. And this is not true only for immunology. Remember when you were in class 6th, you were told that atom is the smallest of whatever species or chemistry. Then you moved to class 7th, you were told electron is the smallest. By the time you were in 11th, 12th or college, you were told that mesons are the ones. So this is how it goes. So when we found this as a non-Y shape, the first question came, does it look like the crystal structure which was solved? So you see the C panel, here what was done was the crystal structure which was solved for this antibody was automatically superimposed in the SAX data, and you see that it fits very well. And this showed that the sort of proved that the asymmetric shape seen by crystallography actually exists very similarly in solution. And the structure of this antibody is not flexible. It rather is very rigid. So here's what we, see. This was a kind of a first paper on this, saying that B12 antibody is inherently rigid and possesses less entropy. And this was a sudden shift in the thought process of how antibodies or neutralizing antibodies are there. So I don't know whether you know this guy on the left hand side, he's Mithun Chakravarti. Mithun Chakravarti got his, that is his first movie by the way, and he got national award for this, for playing a Santhal in the movie. And why I'm showing this image is because it reminds me that sometimes you can't be Hrithik Roshan. You don't get the first movie very nice, but then it's a start. It's a thought process. Then eventually you see the transformation of Mithun Chakravarti as a disco dancer. And today he has inspired people like Hrithik Roshan. I don't know whether inspired or not, but yes, it's a trait. If you can dance very well, this is Tiger Shroff, your movie is hit. In other words, sometimes you have to, when you are different, you have to start wherever you can. Anyway, so expanding the primary observation, I wrote back to NIH AIDS reagent that, hey, I now need more antibodies. All should be IgG1. They should be only mainly differing in their neutralizing potency. So I got a cohort of, now I got a number of antibodies instead of one, some which can neutralize HIV, some which cannot. Now you work hard, and then you start composing your things and send it to reviewer, and then reviewers suggest you suggestions. Anyway, this is another problem in India, because where would you get funds from? Because they start wondering, what the thing you are working on, and it's before time. Anyway, the work I am going to talk about was published in JBC in 2014, led by one of my students, Ashish Solanki, a couple of other students, and then my good friends for last 20 years, Samir and Deepak Nilani. They helped me very critically. I'll tell you how they helped. But then the background of this paper was, it remains unaddressed whether varying neutralization potency of monoclonal antibodies somehow correlated with difference in their shapes. So this is where the story starts with a question. Function is connected with shape. I repeat, function is connected with shape. If function is different, is shape different? This is a very simple question. And we wanted to address this by comparing antibodies which all react to HIV-1. So once we got the antibodies, you want to confirm whether the people who have donated you the antibodies have given good quality antibody or not. So you can see that these are gel filtration profiles. Single peaks kind of support. Most of the antibodies were roughly similar in concentration, and they did not have any aggregation. This is how I appreciate, the protein makers, and then they're giving it to you for kind of free. You accept the shipping charges, which were borne by Deepak Nilani. And then you see these on the upper panel are antibodies which react to HIV GP120, and below are the antibodies, upper cluster are the neutralizing ones, and below are the ones, and are the ones which bind to GP41, the other anchor. So again, we collect data. Data you see is exponential disorder, exponential decay first order, which is fine. It kind of shows none of the proteins were aggregated. This panel is neutralizing, non-neutralizing, neutralizing, non-neutralizing. Again, cracky plots now start showing that there are two clean peaks in case of neutralizing antibodies reactive to GP120, and there are extended peak in case of, or a distal peak in case of non-neutralizing. The main difference came when we started calculating the vector profile in them. If you see this, most of the antibodies which were binding to GP120 and could neutralize had two peaks, except 2G12, where the second peak was slightly shifted. But non-neutralizing antibodies had a big dip. You see this? This big dip was there in the PFRs, whether they are GP41 reactive or 120 reactive. So this indicated between these two plots that the neutralizing antibody, the domains are closer. On the other hand, there appeared to be a gap between the domains in case of antibodies which cannot neutralize HIV. So there was a clear difference in the solution shape profile. Now we had to restore the shape. When we restored the shape and placed, fragments of Fab arm, we found that 17B had one arm extended away, just like B12. Remember B12. On the other hand, in 2G12, as if in punishment, the two Fab arms were clustered on the top, the FC was in the bottom. VRC01, one Fab arm was away, another Fab arm was away. But all the non-neutralizing antibodies which cannot kill HIV and of IgG1 class, grown in similar cell lines as in neutralizing antibodies, showed you a symmetric outlay of Fab arms relative to the central FC. This indicated Y shape and the upper ones showed a skewed or asymmetric shape. This is a rotated view, which is the top view of all this 8 antibodies. You can see that they are all in one plane kind of thing, very beautifully oriented. Now, if we look in the B panel, which is the antibodies which were reactive to GP41, we found that 4E10, the two Fab arms are squeezed together just like 2G12 was, and 2F5, Z13E1, one arm was extended. But non-neutralizing GP41 reactives had the Y shape as we had seen in 120. So this was the first observation that all antibodies do not fold same, and those which were symmetric were lacking neutralization potency, and those with neutralization potency were deviated away from that Y shape. This is what was the first view of it. So when we started looking at it, we were asked, okay, maybe there's a modeling problem. So model it using some other method. So we modeled it unbiased method, and again we got the same result. All the neutralizing antibodies had one arm extended away except 2G12, and non-neutralizing antibodies were Y-shaped. So what did we conclude? We conclude that non-neutralizing antibodies are symmetric. Their two Fab arms are spread away. But another observation which we made was, if you look from the top, the three domains are in one plane. And in neutralizing antibodies, one arm is away, one Fab arm is away, the other Fab arm is close to FC, and the FC is at 90 degrees to the two Fab arms. This is what we observed repeatedly, except for the case of 2G12 and 4E10, which had the two Fab arms very close to each other, but their FC was shifted or tilted at 90 degrees closely, like neutralizing antibodies. Here I want to add that if you go to the paper, the original paper, we have mentioned and given references of electron microscopy data of 2G12 or 96-6 or any antibody which was solved by electron microscopy by that time, and it was very interesting to find that most of our observations were correlating very well with the cryo-EM data, and we were kind of happy with it. But we did much more than the cryo-EM based information which we could get, and kind of moved on this. Anyway, I kind of found that looks like one arm is extended away in the neutralizing antibody and one arm is not. So it reminded me of a 1971 movie. I love this movie. Its name is called, it's titled One Armed Boxer. So there's a martial arts guy who loses one arm, but then he fights with one arm, and it's a beautiful movie. It kind of reminds me of fights by Jack Dempsey and others, where these boxers used to have over-reliance over one hand over usage of both the hands. Anyway, so these neutralizing antibodies reminded me that they have one arm. Question comes, do they box with one arm or they box with both of their arms? Because non-neutralizing antibodies have both the arms which are open, but neutralizing antibodies have one arm open. So what happens? So now when we took, if you see the upper panel, we started mixing GP120 with the antibodies and running them on the column. We mixed them 1:2 ratio because each antibody has two Fab arms. It should be technically capable of binding two ligands. So we added twice the molar component of antigen, which is GP120, and we found something funny. All the neutralizing antibodies, they migrated at a very high position, which is roughly around 350 kind of kilodaltons. And if you see, this is a small peak this is coming because of GP120. On the other hand, neutralizing antibodies, this is very interesting. They had a migration close to 200 to 220 kind of thing, and they had a lot of GP120 left unbound. Polydispersity of both these peaks showed that each one of these is monodispersed. It's not polydispersed peak. This indicated that neutralizing antibodies can bind only one GP120. So anyway, we mixed the samples again as we had seen from gel filtration data, collected sacs, and we processed it. And when we processed it, we found that neutralizing antibodies were forming a much larger complex. If you see roughly around, I can't see, 300 something. On the other hand, I'm sorry. I don't know who's calling and okay, sorry, somebody was calling. I'll put
No, it's okay.
mute. Okay, so on the other hand, neutralizing antibodies had a smaller complex, roughly around 250. Now, when we solve the structure of it, this is kind of a two-component modeling where we presume that the both the components have not changed their shape upon binding. We find that 2G12, which had two Fab arms on top of its head, was binding one GP120 molecule. B12, which we had shown earlier, was binding with one arm. 17B same, and it appeared that the long arm or the arm which was binding GP120 was extended away. On the other hand, non-neutralizing antibodies could bind two GP120s on its, or one GP120 on its each arm, making a ternary complex. So now started the question. Is it the open arm which we saw in the unliganded antibody is binding to antigen and the closed arm is not capable of binding, or when you bind antigen to the antibody, the arm opens up? I hope you got the question. Probably you can replay in the video or you can email me. So what we did, we decided, so this suggestion essentially came from Deepak Nilani. He said, looks like the two Fab arms are positioned away from the central Fc, which we had seen. So their papain digestion profiles will change, which papain cuts in the hinge region or in the linker region of the, at the linker of Fab and Fc. So if we do limited proteolysis, in case of non-neutralizing MABs, both arms should be chopped off. And in case of neutralizing MABs, only the extended arm will be chopped off. So if we can do that, and then we can, so the idea actually came from this 2G12 paper, I think JMB paper or something, where they had chopped off the Fc region by papain, and they had got 100 kilodalton entity, which when they crystallized, they found that it had two Fab arms clustered to each other. So we started doing this experiment, and the conditions were kind of optimized like this. We immobilized papain digestions were done. Deepak did it when he was in my lab here, visiting us for something, and he taught Ashish how to do it. So we took the antibody and we treated it with papain. We had one fraction which was coming around 150 kilodaltons, which was the undigested antibody. Then we had some fraction coming around 100 daltons, which we wanted to analyze later. And then a 50 dalton thing, which we felt could be when all the, or both the hands are chopped off. So this is how the area under the curve with time shows, which shows that how the papain was becoming effective at different times. So we did this for all the antibodies, and we found out what is the best time to, because each antibody has a different shape. So their cutting profile was slightly different, so we had to optimize and get the fractions. Now this was, once we got the fraction, we had to do Western and ELISA to find out, or rather this is Western, to find out whether FC was present in the 100 kilodalton or the 50 kilodalton component or not. So if you find here that for the neutralizing antibodies, I'm repeating, for the neutralizing antibodies, the 50 kilodalton fraction did not have, FC in it. The FC was, we are looking for FC, and the FC was present in the 100 kilodalton fraction. While the reverse was seen for case of Y-shaped non-neutralizing antibodies, the 100 kilodalton did not have FC in it. The FC was primarily present in the 50 kilodalton component. So this suggested that the cutting was incomplete, or one arm was getting cut. This is the non-FC component, or that extended arm which is coming out in neutralizing antibodies. Same was true for GP41 binding neutralizing and non-neutralizing antibodies. And then we tested whether the 100 kilodalton arm, which was chopped off from the neutralizing antibodies, is capable of binding to its antigen or not. So you see these small histograms. This showed that 100 kilodalton fraction, which had FC in it, and probably another Fab arm in the case of neutralizing antibodies, could not bind its antigen. The black bars show the full length antibody. So suddenly upon papain digestion, these neutralizing antibodies, if you see here, lost the ability to bind to their antigen. Same way but for the 50 kilodalton fraction, the 50 kilodalton fraction was capable of binding to the antigen except for 2G12. Because 2G12 was different, its two Fab arms were bound to each other. So we knew that FC lacking portion 100 kilodalton should bind, and that's what kind of happened. So this is what was the indirect interpretation of the data. Then we purified the fractions, and you see that this is the 100 kilodalton digestion component from B12. And when you model its structure, you find that it has FC and one closed Fab arm present in it, but it does not have the extended arm, which means that extended arm got cut away. This is the two Fab arms of 2G12 with its crystal structure present inside, showing that it's cut cleanly at the top of FC. This is 17B and all of this. And interestingly, this is the 50 kilodalton cut arm of 17B, B12, and they can bind to 1GP120. And you can see in this one, the 2G12, the two Fab arms, cut arms bind to GP120. So this is how we kind of showed that, like the one arm boxer, neutralizing antibodies have this skewed extended one arm away, which is the functional entity. So it can do the expected job by one hand, as exception is 2G12. Now came another interesting question. When you increase ionic strength in the buffer, the antibodies which are capable of neutralizing HIV, they lose their ability to neutralize HIV. Or if you lower the pH of the buffer, they again lose their ability to neutralize. Rather bind and, sorry, I will come to that, they lose their ability to neutralize. So one of my students, Malik, in the lab, he took the antibodies, dialyzed them against different buffers, and he found that at pH 8, roughly the antibody is like what we see, asymmetric shape. And when we treat it with pH 4, we get symmetric shape. You again increase the pH, you get the asymmetric shape. So this means that the antibody can go back and forth into neutralizing, non-neutralizing, neutralizing shape. So this kind of confirmed that the open structure of a closed antibody cannot neutralize, or openness leads to loss of neutralization capacity. So we did some experiments where the different pH treated antibody was seen if it can bind to its antigen, and we found that as we decrease the pH except 2G12, which doesn't change its shape. I think, let me go back, 2G12, 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 2G12. You see that 2G12 doesn't change its shape. Except 2G12, all the antibodies lost their ability to bind to GP120. Same way, a synthetic peptide was made for GP41 by Samir, and these were coated on ELISA plate, and we found that GP41 reactive antibodies also lost their ability to bind to their peptides as a function of pH, as a function of salt, as we increase salt in the buffer. So this is what kind of indirectly supported that open shape cannot bind to its antigen and thus cannot neutralize. Very funny. Anyway, those who have interest in immunology, there's a very strong component of innate immune system which is called complement dependent cytotoxicity, where this complement component 1Q, which is easily called C1Q, is a protein complex, and it binds, it's composed, and it binds to kind of FC hinge region of the antibodies to elicit neutralization, further neutralization by binding to gamma receptor or something, or cytokine development, and then kills the virus or clears the antigen. So we tested one very simple experiment. We coated C1Q on the plates, and we found that neutralizing antibodies can bind to C1Q slightly better than non-neutralizing antibodies. But if you use the cut FC, the chopped off FC, it binds much better, which is kind of expected because C1Q is expected to bind FC. Now when you add your ligand or GP120 to the system, you find that neutralizing antibody bind much more, or the number of copies bound are much more, while non-neutralizing antibodies, they don't show a change. The Fab FC portion is comparable, which does not have one arm. This is from the neutralizing antibodies, can also bind very well. So the concept which we kind of concluded from all the work was C1Q has to bind to upper portion of FC, and this upper portion of FC is easily available in the twisted FC orientation in case of neutralizing antibodies, and in case of non-neutralizing antibodies or antibodies lacking this ability, the C1Q binding portion is not open. My student Ashish, he did a lot of docking studies also, which still remain unpublished, because I was hoping that one day I will get another student and who will get real experimental data where I can club with Ashish's data. Kind of shows that C1Q does not get suffocated looking for a space to bind in antibodies which eventually show Y shape and lack neutralizing ability. So this is what we concluded from our work. Lessons learned. It's always fun to explore new routes, and SACS is a wonderful tool in that fun experience. Simple experiments need to be done rather than complicated ones. They give you clear-cut results. And then, since antibody structure regulates its function, this part is clear that all antibodies are not Y-shaped, even when they are from the same type and they bind to the same. अभी complete नहीं हुआ है सर, complete नहीं हुआ है, अभी रहता है, अभी story में दम है, अभी 2 गाने और रहते हैं. So and then hinge is very critical. So what happens? When we study antibodies, we study about FAB-arm, CDR, FC, but what we don't study is the hinge. So nowadays, when I go to wherever talks and I say I am going to engineer hinge to change the neutralization capacity of an antibody, people say ab to pagal ho gaya. But then my logic is very simple. ठीक है बॉस, कोई अपना टाइम शायरी लिख के टाइम वेस्ट करता है, हम न्यूट्रलाइजिंग एफिकेसी को चेंज करके देखेंगे, हो जाएगा, नहीं होगा, नहीं होगा. But then the biggest question lies is, this is not for us. This is for the people who will live longer than us in this Facebook whatever live. Is this story limited to HIV? The advantage of working with HIV is that I could get antibodies against the same antigen differing in their neutralizing potency. I could compare two nice things. आज की डेट में कोविड फैला हुआ है, ठीक है, and then can we isolate monoclonal antibodies and study this? So anyway, story was this: HIV CD4 से bind करता है, problems create करता है. तो इंटरेस्टिंग है कि अगर हम इस पे काम कर सकते हैं, क्या हम रिवर्स कर सकते हैं स्टोरी को? क्या हम ऐसा डियर ट्रेन कर सकते हैं, ऐसी एंटीबॉडी ट्रेन कर सकते हैं जो कि हंटर को मार सके? So the idea is very simple. This idea goes back to 1995 when Progenics ने एक ऐसी एंटीबॉडी बनाई जिसने कहा कि भैया हमें नहीं पता कि FAB-arm कैसे काम करता है, क्या नहीं करता. उन्होंने CD4 को ग्राफ्ट कर दिया. ये भी एक एग्जांपल है एंटीबॉडी का कि जिसके अंदर IgG2 पे ग्राफ्ट किया और FC का कोई रोल नहीं है. और इसकी न्यूट्रलाइजेशन कैपेसिटी, इफ यू कैन सी दिस ग्राफ on right hand side or on the left hand side, these histograms, CD4 IgG2 can actually neutralize HIV around 8 to 10 times faster than any known antibody. This engineered antibody is so fast. It has not come into commercial arena because of many different economical reasons. But then it was a curious case. ये कैसे करता है? तो ये चतुर्भुज एंटीबॉडी है, इसके 4 आर्म्स हैं. और रूल के हिसाब से है कि एक एंटीबॉडी अगर एक आर्म पे बाइंड करेगी, दूसरी साइड पे जाके बाइंड करनी चाहिए. पर देन वी डिड सैक्स एक्सपेरिमेंट व्हिच शोड दैट पहला आर्म जब बाइंड करता है, दूसरा उसी हाथ पे बाइंड करता है. This accelerates the binding capacity of the protein and then it kind of neutralizes much faster. दूसरा इसकी लेंथ, इसकी जो क्रॉस लेंथ है वो बढ़ती जा रही है, बिकॉज जैसे जैसे HIV हमारे साथ रह रहा है उसकी सरफेस कॉपीज कम होती जा रही है. तो नाउ यू नीड एन एंटीबॉडी, जो नेचुरल एंटीबॉडीज है उनका स्प्रेड उतना नहीं है. तो you need antibodies which are longer, kind of IgA antibodies. But then what we did, agar this is true कि IgG2 काम करता है, can we take a non-protein or a protein component which is non-FC, engineer a molecule? So here's what microbiology starts coming in. So you do genetic engineering, you express this protein in bacteria or wherever you can, and you make essentially, you graft CD4. Now, interestingly, HIV is hunting for CD4. So you, instead of FAB-arm, you added CD4, which HIV is looking for. And in return, we made 2 molecules which can neutralize as fast as CD4 IgG2, but not as fast as CD4 IgG2. So at least कुछ काम तो किया हमने, ज़्यादा नहीं कर पाए. But then all I say is, अगर इसके साथ functional FC भी होता तो कितना मजा आता. That is what would have been real engineering. Going back to the same question, science का paper, science का question था crystal structure, a template for vaccine design. So again, this journey has been like one arm boxer. हम एक ही काम करते रहे, हम स्ट्रक्चर ही सॉल्व करते रहे, न्यूट्रलाइजेशन पोटेंशियल को भी सेटअप नहीं कर पाए. सो दूसरा आर्म कभी खुला ही नहीं. सो वैक्सीन डिजाइन कैसे करें, क्योंकि हमको तो कुछ चीजें आती ही नहीं है करनी. So now what has happened is I have learned the art of collaboration. मेरा एक हाथ दूसरे का एक हाथ, हम दोनों मिलके वैक्सीन कर सकते हैं. I found a friend जो न्यूट्रलाइजेशन ऐसे लगाने में एक्सपर्ट है. उसको प्रॉब्लम है कि जो वैक्सीन बना रहा है वो ठीक है कि नहीं. तो मैं क्या कर रहा हूँ, मैं उसका वैक्सीन ले रहा हूँ, उसका साइज डेटा सॉल्व कर रहा हूँ, उसको दिखा रहा हूँ, देख तेरा जो वैक्सीन है वो बिल्कुल वैसा ही दिखता है जैसा कि इलेक्ट्रॉन माइक्रोस्कोपी से आता है. सो अब हम दोनों के एक एक हाथ ज्वाइन हो गए हैं. वेरी लाइकली वी विल फाइंड दैट डे बैक ईएन विल्सन ने जो छापा था टेम्पलेट फॉर वैक्सीन डिजाइन. एंड देन पेन इज पार्ट ऑफ द गेम. एंड दिस इज हाउ आई सी ये जो लड़कियां जो बाल खींच रही हैं, दिस इज हाउ आई अंडरस्टैंड इंडियन साइंस. कोई आगे जाता है तो ऐसे बिहेव, बट देन यू शुड हैव एक कैंची साथ में अपना बाल काट के यू टू मूव ऑन. और those who are bored with this talk should watch this movie Pumping Iron. अर्नोल्ड श्वार्ज़नेगर की मिस्टर ओलंपिया बनने की स्टोरी है. It shows that not only you have to be physically strong, you have to be mentally strong to go through science. उसने बॉडी बिल्डिंग की, हम लोग डेटा बनाते हैं. ठीक है. Any questions now? I am done with my thing. I don't know how we will be taking questions. Gupta ji.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Ashish. You can put off your slides.
Yeah, I did.
So, if Dr. Kusum is around, she can join us in the
Yes,
discussion.
yes, Dr. Naveen. Can I ask him one question?
Yeah, you
Dr.
please
Sahab,
ask.
Dr. Sahab, very nicely you have explained the role of antibodies, and very beautifully you have told the non-neutralizing and neutralizing antibodies having symmetrical shape and asymmetrical shape at different pH. So, my query was that what kind of a role do you see of these neutralizing antibodies to tackle the SARS-CoV-2 virus? Is it true with case of all viruses, or is it the story is true only for the HIV? And the second is that what is the plasma therapy? Is plasma therapy going to play a role for treatment or not?
Right. So, answer to second question first. Plasma therapy has a role not only for COVID but for any given infection, right? Where your immune system is working. Be dengue, be something. It is one of the oldest way of spiking, and it's not something new. We have tried insulin repletion therapy. There are so many other cases where if something goes wrong, we put it from outside. People like Naveen Gupta, if they stop doing microbiology and protein expression, ये सारा business बंद हो जाएगा. So plasma repletion will always remain useful. प्रॉब्लम कहाँ पे है? प्रॉब्लम है किस पेशेंट का प्लाज्मा एक्चुअली यूजफुल है. विच मीन्स दैट आपको जब प्लाज्मा मिलता है आप उसका न्यूट्रलाइजेशन ऐसे लगाते हैं और चेक करते हैं कि लॉग फोल्ड में वो कितना वायरस को मार पा रहा है, और फिर आप सीरोटाइपिंग मैचिंग करके पेशेंट को देते हैं ये सोच के कि जिस पेशेंट के अंदर से न्यूट्रलाइजिंग एफिकेसी मान लो ऑर्डर 3 था वो रिटेन होकर 2 रह जाएगा और बंदे की इम्यून सिस्टम को या पेशेंट की इम्यून सिस्टम को मदद मिलेगी आगे जाने के लिए. वहां पे थोड़ा सा कैच आ जाता है कि न्यूट्रलाइजेशन ऐसे जो है इट टेक्स गुड टर्न अराउंड टाइम, एंड सो इन केस ऑफ इमरजेंसी सिचुएशंस you can't go rationally. You have serotyping matching and you try. So ये एक छोटा सा कैच है क्योंकि इसके अंदर अभी मेथड्स डेवलप नहीं हुए हैं. आपका पहला क्वेश्चन था कि क्या ये सार्स कोविड में भी सिमेट्रिक एसिमेट्रिक का रोल है. मैडम सुबह शाम में यही क्वेश्चन सोचता रहता हूँ. इसका प्रॉब्लम ये है कि एक तो मैं एंटी सोशल कैरेक्टर हूँ मैडम, तो मैं इजीली लोगों से दोस्ती करता नहीं, और दोस्ती करता हूँ तो छोड़ता नहीं. पर हाँ, अगर दोस्ती का मेजर प्रॉब्लम आता है, मेरे कंडीशंस हैं कि either you give me these monoclonal antibodies I can study or you give it to somebody who can study. We are trying to find out a panel. अभी सिर्फ 6 महीने हुए हैं इस डिजीज को. We have not got this panel of antibodies available. दूसरा क्या है, anything and everybody is a virologist nowadays. So किसी के साथ भी आप बात करने जाओगे, मान लो मैं आपके साथ दोस्ती करता हूँ, मैडम मुझे एंटीबॉडीज दो, वो नहीं चलेगा. So I am looking at finding. So बीच में I was looking at dengue के neutralizing antibodies, and Erika Sapphire, who was the first author of this paper, is looking against botulism के against में antibodies को, and we are finding similar results. ये 2019-18 का गेम है, अभी स्टोरी खुल रही है. Let's see how it goes.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sir. Mhm.
Hello, I think Dr. Kusum, your question has been answered. So,
Yes.
Sheesh, wonderful lecture.
Yes.
It was so beautifully explained. So, some of the questions which the other viewers have asked me on my WhatsApp and all that. So, although you have answered it partially, I think already in the lecture, but I will read out their questions. Is this, as you said in the last slide, is this restricted to HIV? If not, then are there any other groups who are working on some other type of antibodies, some other diseases and all that?
Yes, monoclonal antibody-based neutralization, everybody is trying. In India, many people, many companies are trying in Europe. But this kind of experiment, which, see, my point is very simple one. If you succeed in making a neutralizing antibody, that is first way forward for passive immunization, where when you have a problem, you can buy the antibody from outside and inject it inside a patient. Question is, why, if I become HIV positive, my body can make IgG1, but it cannot neutralize? Can I reprogram my own immune system? You getting me? Can I convert my non-neutralizing antibody into neutralizing? Because that is the challenge. So if people are working in scattered mode, like in my lab, I focused on looking at antibodies, comparing antibodies which are HIV reactive. Erika is looking at Botox. Then in between, I think I know a Brazilian group looking at Zika. So slowly, people are converging. We are realizing that working in isolation is not possible. Companies are coming forward, working with one company to look at, their passive immunization traits, because they are making multiple antibodies. So again, the problem comes when you start expressing the protein and using fermenter at a very large scale. 1 लाख लीटर के आप fermenters चलाते हो, तब उसके बाद एंटीबॉडी जो बन के आती है वो काम नहीं करती. You getting me?
Yeah, that's what Dr. Ashish,
ये चल रहा है, ये आगे चलेगा अभी. मतलब मेरी एक्सपर्टीज नहीं है कि मैं एंटीबॉडीज को बनाऊं और स्क्रीन करूं. मेरे को हमेशा एक हाथ चाहिए होगा दूसरा. Right.
So I was just wondering, Dr. Ashish, once more, even if we make neutralizing antibodies, because as you said, number of other things will be required, complement and other things might be which we don't know yet. Whether
Yes.
they will work when we'll put in a system or not, all those has to be standardized, I suppose.
Yes, so this is retro engineering. We know this is what is preferred to work.
Yeah.
मेरी बात समझ गए? This is like see, I come from a thought process, structure determines function. तो यहाँ तक तो मैंने अपना काम सही से कर दिया. Can I modulate structure to get function and then retain it in a rabbit or in a human being is next step.
Yeah, so
हमसे नहीं होगा. गुप्ता जी हमसे नहीं होगा ये काम बाकी लोगों से होगा. हमारा काम हो गया, हम ऊँट पे बैठ गए, बाकी लोगों को ऊँट चला के दिखाना है.
So structure and function should coordinate. That will be a great job.
Yeah. So you have at least we have given a building block, that structure is solved. So now we can think about that. And another is, Dr. Ashish, can to bacterial and some other antigens also, apart from viral, you are trying or something like that? Somebody is asking. Hello? Dr. Sheesh, your mic is off. Dr. Sheesh,
I
your
am not
mic is
trying.
off.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, now it's on. So no, I am not trying anything new. My focus is nowadays on the vaccine, right? And few observations which I have made. Um, but I have one very clear approach. If you have something and you want to look at it, I am available. I,
Yeah.
I am
Uh,
I am not working on anything. My approach is very clear. I'm working on the vaccine because
yeah.
I firmly believe that vaccine is the way to go.
Yeah.
पैसिव इम्यूनाइजेशन कर लेंगे
So,
जब नहीं कर लेंगे. Yes.
True, true. That is true,
the,
Doctor Saab. The active immunization and the active immunity will play a better role
Right.
yeah.
through vaccine. Yes.
So, there are a number of other questions because I know if we will keep on asking Dr. Ashish, then this interesting discussion we can carry over for a very long time. But
किसी ने गाली
most
दी
of
है
the
मेरे.
people who have anybody who wish to discuss with him, go to his lab. Even I'm saying this, taking this guarantee. If you wish to go to his lab, he is always welcome. I will share his number with his number on
That
my
is there.
page and all that. So now I will take the opportunity to propose a vote of thanks. First
ठीक
of
है.
all, I am thankful to Dr. Ashish for giving such a wonderful lecture. And I must say, this is only one part of the science he is doing. A number of other wonderful things. I think I can have a complete series and all. His wonderful lectures, we keep on bothering him repeatedly. And I'm thankful he's leaving for US in couple of days. Still, when I requested him, he agreed to give this lecture in a short notice. And so I'm so thankful to Dr. Ashish to you. You agreed and you gave a wonderful lecture. Then I'm thankful to Professor Kusum Arjai, Chairperson Department of Microbiology, for joining us today. And I'm thankful to Vice Chancellor Punjab University, whose umbrella we are having this lecture series. I'm thankful to Professor Prince Sharma, President AMI Chandigarh Unit, and Professor S.K. Soni, Vice President AMI Chandigarh Unit, for giving all the support for just managing all this. They are always being always available to us. And I'm thankful to all the faculty members of Department of Microbiology and all the ordinary members of AMI Chandigarh unit for supporting this activity. Last but not the least, I am thankful to all the viewers who have joined us live and in advance to all those who will be seeing a recorded version of this lecture. And as all of you know, it will be put on our YouTube channel also. I have already shared the link of that YouTube on in the poster. So I am thankful to all those in advance who will be following our lecture. So I'm thankful to all, and once again I'm thankful to Dr. Ashish for giving such a wonderful lecture, and I will request all to join in our future lectures also. So thank you everybody please for joining. Thank you Dr.
Bye.
Ashish. Thank you Dr.
Bye.
Kusum.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Gupta ji.